G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. And I'm going to be terribly daring. I'm going to risk the wrath of all the angry atheists. I'm going to read another article from New Scientist magazine. Not that I'm going to say anything at all whatsoever about atheism, it's just that last time I read an article from New Scientist magazine, the atheist community went absolutely bananas and ape shit. Because the article in the New Scientist magazine last time suggested that there might be a link between atheism and autism because 90% of autistic teenagers surveyed turned out to be atheists. Therefore, the atheist community decided that the research must have been obviously cooked up in order to establish some kind of a allegedly spurious link between atheism and autism. And they spent the best part of a week telling me what a horrible person I was before I apologised for daring to read the article, and they paid attention to the fact that there were actually 4 or 5 other studies on much larger groups of people, all of which supported, backed up, and more or less proved the veracity of the original small study. Now, here I sit out here under a gum tree in a tin shed in Australia. I have no television, by choice, because it's an addictive piece of technology, due to the fact that you cannot decode the soundtrack unless you got the visual cues. And whereas I can be ear-fed by Radio National, listening to something like the Science Report, while I'm doing something else, if I try to listen to a television soundtrack, I can't decode it without stopping what I'm doing and going and sitting down in front of the bloody thing and looking at the screen in order to decode it. And because it's, the miracle of the age, I expect it to tell me something reasonable or worth knowing, instead of having it demand that I go and purchase the latest brand of breakfast cereal. So no, I have no television. I have a radio. I listen to the Australian government's elitist brand of radio called ABC Radio National. And I read New Scientist, because New Scientist magazine, although it is not itself a peer-reviewed journal, it only covers articles which have previously been printed in peer-reviewed scientific journals, or articles submitted by people who have a degree from a university. Some of them are scientists who have a journalism degree, some of them are journalists who have a science degree. But it's pretty hard to get printed in New Scientist unless you're going for the letters column or the feedback page. Right? That's my experience. They've never published anything I sent them. Unlike Aeroplane Monthly, which I've been reading since 1973, and Air and Space Smithsonian, like New Scientist, they've never published anything that I sent them, but I've been reading them since the 1990s. So I'm kind of in a position to say that the one Achilles heel of New Scientist is the editorial staff's lack of reality checking when it comes to aeronautical engineering. They weren't actually so very far wrong in their article about autism and atheism, and I wasn't so very far wrong to be trusting the general tenor of their article. They were a bit kind of tabloid and spectacularist in the way they presented the information, but they weren't actually wrong. So, because I'd like to draw your attention to something that's got nothing at all to do with aeroplanes, a lot to do with computers and security systems, let's have a look at an article in, I think it's the 16th of June, New Scientist, because I spend too much time on YouTube and I'm about a month behind, even though my newsagent saves copies of all 3 magazines. So, page 24, under the heading of technology, we have, unlike the FBI on Facebook. You might think twice about a post if the government were watching. Satirical newspaper The Onion, got a bit of a shout out here to Wes, the sweet old man who first introduced me to The Onion on YouTube. Satirical newspaper The Onion recently described Facebook as a project of the Central Intelligence Agency. Quote, "After years of secretly monitoring the public, we were astounded," unquote. A fictional agency deputy director told Congress he was happy that Facebook users voluntarily post, quote, "alphabeticized lists of all their friends, and even status updates about what they were doing moment to moment," unquote. It is, he concluded, a, quote, "truly a dream come true for the CIA." The scenario is not that far from the truth. Facebook has close to 1 billion users, many of whom post daily updates on their thoughts and feelings. The same thing happens on Twitter. Foursquare users share information about their location. Commentators on news sites express opinions and outrage, and, as a New Scientist review of procurement requests shows, the US government is keen to take advantage of what amounts to a society of self-surveillance. In a way, they are behind the curve. Marketing firms already monitor social networks to gauge public reaction to product launches. And online chatter can be analysed to forecast election results. For example, US federal agencies want to harness these techniques in an attempt to gauge overseas opinion about America, or even get hints of how to head off terrorist activities. With these aims in mind, officials at the Department of State issued a procurement notice on 1 June asking software developers to submit bids for a contract to supply tools that provide, quote, "deep analysis of topics, conversations, networks and influences of the global social web." These tools will analyse conversations taking place in at least 7 foreign languages, including Chinese and Arabic. Once the bids are in, the software systems will undergo a 6-month trial in which they will examine online reaction to a specific event, such as a talk given by a US ambassador. The military is even further along with such plans. In 2007, the US Air Force awarded defence giant Lockheed Martin a $27 million contract to develop Web Information Spread Data Operations Module, or WISDOM, which analyses posts made to news forums, blogs and social media. Military analysts, are already using it to monitor Central and South America and the Pacific region. Lockheed Martin is now upgrading WISDOM with a $9 million contract from the Navy, which wants to, quote, "understand the latest regional trends and sentiment and predict threats from groups and individuals." Hi guys, how you going? I'm a pacifist vegetarian, a tree hugger, a greenie. You can leave me alone, eh? Other departments have similar plans. The FBI is talking to software vendors, and the Department of Homeland Insecurity has already a monitoring system up and running. How might such monitoring affect our online behaviour? Imagine reading an article about US government policies and then wanting to post an angry comment. Would you pause if you knew the government would collect and store your comment and username? Interesting. This prevents people from speaking their minds, says Ginger McCall of the Electronic Privacy Information Centre in Washington, D.C. Quote, "it quells dissent," unquote. One would hope government officials had such concerns in mind. It's difficult to say, however, because repeated attempts by New Scientists to obtain comments from the Department of State were met with silence, says Jim Giles. Isn't that an interesting little article? Now, the bit I find a bit curious is the colophon, the finishing stroke. This prevents people from speaking their minds, says Ginger McCall of the Electronic Privacy Information Centre in Washington, D.C. It quells dissent, unquote. And that's when Jim Giles, the journalist, says one would hope government officials had such concerns in mind. So the journalist states he is hoping the government understood that by developing such software they would put a lid on the commentariat. They would stop people from speaking their minds. Alright, I think this is something that really is worth disputing. The best way I can think of disputing such a trend is what's known as the red flag message. Alright, now a red flag message is something I am absolutely used to receiving from my daughter over the text message from her mobile phone. What it means is she's got some spare credit and she's bored. So it goes something like, red flag message, 3 exclamation marks, next line. Airport, bomb, altitude, Jyad. Parliament, Congress, Senate, Olympics. 12,700 feet. Radionuclides. Stock market. Railway. Bus depot. Siren. Blevy. Boiling liquid expanding vapour explosion. Allah Akbar. God is great. What would Jesus do? Message ends. And when she has the credit, she sends that to me and 40 or 50 other people that she knows. And the whole idea is to light up their board. So the Australian Secret Intelligence Service or the Australian Secret Intelligence Organisation or the Department of Homeland Insecurity or the Australian Federal Police or maybe the CIA or the American Department of Homeland Insecurity, whoever it is that monitors the SMS network, can get a forest of red flags and they can recalibrate and cope with the idea that normal people think they're paranoid. Why do we think they're paranoid? Could it be because New Scientist magazine carried an article about peer-reviewed research reported in a peer-reviewed journal on how people had done CT scans of right-wing law and order top-down hierarchical control freaks and discovered that in their brain, their amygdala, the part that responds to stress, the right side of their amygdala is hypertrophied, it's overgrown, it's overdeveloped. They have extra nerve circuits for being paranoid with. By comparison, the same research did brain scans on left-wing civil libertarians, peace, love, brown rice and alfalfa sproutsologists, and they found that they didn't have overdeveloped right-sided amygdalae. They didn't have any extra circuits for being paranoid with and imagining threats where none exist. Oh no, the left-wing civil libertarians, they had extra circuits in the cingulate gyrus, anterior cingulate gyrus, proximal cingulate gyrus, something in the cingulate gyrus, which according to the research, as I recall it, and I don't pretend to be sober, it's the part of the brain which detects errors. So cheers for that. All the right-wing law and order fascists who want to stand in neat straight lines and compare how shiny their shoes are and how straight the creases in the trousers are, they have extra circuits for being paranoid, fearful, trembling, imagining threats where none exist. All the left-wing peace, love, brown rice and alfalfa sproutsologists, the civil libertarians, they have extra circuits for detecting errors and bullshit in the paranoias of the right-wing military fanatics. So, I drink my beer at you, YouTube. Ha ha. Ciao.